Scripture reading this morning is 1 Corinthians 1:18-31. It's on the back of your bulletin if you'd like to follow along. For the message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not know God through wisdom, God decided through the foolishness of our proclamation to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks desire wisdom. But we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God, and the power and the wisdom of God. For God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. Consider your own call, brothers and sisters. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, things that are not, to reduce to nothing things that are, so that no one might boast in the presence of God. He is the source of your life in Christ Jesus, who became for us wisdom from God, and righteousness and sanctification and redemption, in order that, as it is written, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. This is God's good news for all of God's people.
Thanks be to God.
Bow your heads in prayer. Lord, I ask for nothing less than your wisdom in these words. I do not seek to be clever in this time. I seek to be yours. For your hearts that are gathered here, we pray. In your Son's name. Amen. So the old joke goes, and you guys probably are familiar with this, and it's been around for a long time. There were two boys fighting over the first waffle. Now, I don't know if you grew up in one of those homes that had the one waffle maker, and it made one waffle, and it made it perfectly. I loved my mom's waffles, but they only came out one at a time, and you had to wait, and sometimes the wait was excruciating. And especially, I had a brother that's 7 years older than I am, and talk about low man on the totem pole. And I'm like waiting for that waffle, but I knew I was going to have to wait. Well, the joke goes, or the story goes, that there were these two boys, and they were fighting over that first waffle. And the mom, in her great wisdom, said, "Now, boys, Jesus would give his brother the first waffle." Without batting an eye, the older brother says, "Okay, Timmy, you be Jesus." Now, I get a lot of mileage out of that joke, as I've said it, I've told it several times. But this morning, I wanted to tease out just this one question. The older brother was smart. He got the first waffle. He got, kind of got it over on his mom. He was smart. He wasn't kind. He was smart, but was he kind? Mom's trying to tell him what the kind thing is, and he's obviously choosing the smart one. Smart. To get ahead, that's the smart thing. Or a prophet, that's smart. All that stuff. But I gotta ask you, when life is hard, and the news is bad, and your heart is broken, do you want smart, or do you want kind? Who do you rely on in your life? Doctors, policemen, bankers, politicians, the list goes on. And certainly we want, let's say, for instance, our doctors, we want them to be intelligent, we want them to be as understanding of the processes and everything, up on the best procedures and all that good stuff. But I need to make a distinction between intelligent and the smart that we're talking about this morning. Intelligent means that you know your craft. Now, Jesus was raised in the home of a carpenter, and some scholars think that Joseph was probably more a stonemason than a carpenter. But either way, he knew his trade. He knew exactly how to do what he needed to do to get the results that he wanted. And that kind of intelligence is certainly valued and wonderful. We need those people in our lives. What Jesus was talking about in the Corinthian community was something else. That smart part that Jesus was talking about were the ones that had set themselves above and kind of beyond the community, and they had set themselves up as an understanding of a priestly class. You know, the ones that were, no offense to our ad council, but the ones that chose the top seats in the program and always were at the top of their place, and it was a part of pride. And that's the smart that Paul is talking about here in this letter to the Corinthians. I'm sorry, not Jesus, but Paul. And he's saying that sort of smarts may only go quite so far. What Jesus is talking about is being kind. There's a difference between being a servant and being a serpent. Now, I actually had to, I'm sorry, I'm going to confess that occasionally the spelling of a word completely escapes me, and I could not think for the life of me how to spell the word serpent. Is there an E or an A at the end of this doggone thing? And so I Googled it. I went to the definition and just figured out, yes, it's an E, by the way, in case you struggle and are challenged like I am. But I also saw what the definitions were. And the first definition is a long snake. You know, a long serpent. A serpent is a long snake. But the second definition was right underneath it, and it said that person that exploits the trust of those that put trust in them. And so that's the one that's the definition I want you to keep in mind when Paul is talking about being smart in the world's kind of way. That, you know, those are the people that we're dealing with, and those are the folks that Paul was writing this to in his letter to the Corinthians. The contrast there, of course, is Jesus. That servant's heart that Christ offers to us. From birth to the cross and beyond, Jesus was a servant Savior. He was kind. He wasn't always political. He wasn't always the most popular. Being kind is not necessarily, something that's going to go down well with powers that be. That's going to be difficult for everyone else to kind of understand. When you're playing by the rules of the world, when you're playing by the rules of the serpent, quite frankly, running up against somebody that's kind may actually rub you the wrong way. So what do you want to be? Do you want to be smart? Or do you want to be kind? The early church brought together some people that might not have made the cut on, what are some of the job sites out there? Monster.com is the only one that comes to mind. There are others that are going. But quite frankly, the resume for most of the disciples wouldn't have got them a job, doing much other than fishing. You had one tax collector in there, and he might have been good for something else, but quite frankly, with his track record, he probably wouldn't have gotten hired either. These are guys that are not necessarily on anybody's A list, And Jesus goes out and finds them and recruits them and brings them into his inner circle and says, you will be my disciples. One he says he will build his church on. Just a fisherman. You know, the Bible is full of people that didn't quite make the cut. You know, there's that. I don't know if you've run across this list. It's quite long, but you know, it talks about Noah being a drunk and Moses being a stutterer, and the list goes on and on. God's been recruiting broken people and B-list folks for a long time. Jesus did the same thing when he called his disciples together. Jesus did the same thing when he's talking to the crowd. There's that moment of the Beatitudes. Remember the Beatitudes? Blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor, blessed are those that grieve. He wasn't just talking to a random crowd. He was talking to those people. They were in the community and in the congregation at the time. They were listening to him on that hillside. And he spoke to them and said, blessed are you in your brokenness, in your poverty, in your despair, in your grief. Blessed are you. Not blessed are you because you have an amazing bank account, or you drive a really smoking hot car, or you have a really big house on the hillside, by the way. No. Jesus called into our brokenness and said, blessed are you. Because that was the kind thing to do. And smart money in the crowd at that time, you know, it was if you were successful, if you had lots of kids, if you were well respected in the community, then you know, the Hebrew community understood that those were ways that God blesses people. And the people that had no children, that had no money, that had no house, those people were considered cursed by some way. Remember the story when somebody asked Jesus, the disciples asked Jesus, there's a man blind from birth. And the disciples say, now, Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents? And Jesus says, neither. Neither. What's happening here is that this man is an opportunity for someone to show God's grace, for us to experience God's power. Because that's kind. That's what kind does. Smart walks right by the blind guy and says, well, he must have done something. Kind stops and kneels down towards into the ear, into the heart of that individual, rubs a little mud and dirt on this guy's eyes and heals him. That's what kind does. Do you want to be smart, or do you want to be kind? 25th chapter of Matthew, starting around the 31st verse. Pardon me. So, 25th chapter of Matthew, around the 35th verse, 31st it starts. Jesus is talking about, he's telling the parable of the sheep and the goats. You may or may not remember that, but the ones that get it right are the ones that reach out to the least and the last and lost. The naked, the jailed, the impoverished, the hungry, the thirsty, and reaching out to those, he says to those that have helped those people, you have done as you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. Because you have been kind to your brothers and sisters and you have shown God's grace. Come into my kingdom. You see, the thing about people that are broken, Jesus recruits, God's recruits throughout history. The thing about people that are broken and acknowledge the fact that we are broken is that we've got room in our hearts for God to come in. You got any room for God in your heart when you feel like you're on top of your game and on top of the world and you have everything going on and you think, I have done amazing things. I think I've got this, Jesus. It's okay. You see, when our hearts are so full of ourselves, we may not have a whole lot of room for God. We don't have room for kind. We've got room for smart, because smart just makes us richer, fatter, whatever. I love this piece out of verse 26. I actually called that to a couple of people's attention during the last week when it hit me. Here's Paul talking to the people of Corinth, and you've got to understand that Paul is not the best salesperson on the planet. So if you want to look on the back of your bulletin on verse 26, it goes like this. Consider your own call, brothers and sisters. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were powerful, and not many were of noble birth. Boy, can Paul sell a deal or what? But here's the thing. Paul's not going for smart. He's going for kind. He's calling to the attention of these people that you're not full of yourself. Maybe you're not at the top of your game, but you've got room in your heart for God. But God chose what is foolish in this world to shame the wise. Foolish in that world would have been the people that didn't quite get it, that weren't quite as wise, or weren't quite as successful, I'm sorry. God chose what is weak in this world to shame the strong, what is low and despised in this world to reduce to nothing the things that are. Now, what happens when we adopt smart as our way of life? Some say that Christianity suffered badly, if not died, at a place called the Milnius Bridge. Constantine led his army to a battle in that location, and at the bequest of his mother or mother-in-law, I'm not sure which one, but literally as a bow to the culture that was starting to become more and more Christian around him at that time, Constantine put a Christian symbol, the Cairo, on his battle banners. And that's what led the company into battle. And he succeeded. He won the battle, and he gave God the credit and made Christianity the state religion at that moment. It became the official religion of Rome. Now, why did Christianity die at that point? Because at that point we decided that we were going to accept what the world's smarts were, what the world's definition of success in battle, success in business. We lost kind in that moment. Our founding fathers recognized the danger in this and very wisely said that there's going to be a distinction, a separation between what the state says and what the church does. Because if we mix those two things, suddenly the church becomes the state's tool. It becomes that thing that we colonize with, the thing that we justify by, that thing that we have corrupted. Our founding fathers recognized that religion needs to be able to speak truth to power, to be that prophetic voice that is not popular, to be that word that tells us that what we may want to do because it might be popular, might be profitable, may not be right. The church needs to be God's wisdom in a world to those that govern from every level, from the smallest community all the way through. It is that great commandment that calls to us to love God and love our neighbor. This goes for every level of our lives. We should listen to that prophetic voice and find those moments when we are trying to be clever, trying to be smart, and turning our back on being kind, to answering God's call, finding God's wisdom, hearing those deeper truths. The world has a lot of smart people. Quite frankly, we've got enough. What we need are more good people, kind people, committed to loving like Jesus did. Go back to the joke at the beginning of the sermon. We need to be Jesus, because the world's waiting for its waffle. We need to be servants, not serpents. Not out there looking out for number one, but looking out for the rest. So that's the end of the sermon. No big bang, no wonderful, close, no heart-wrenching thing. The good news is that God calls you to be kind, and in doing so, you are doing God's own work, God's own business. God calls you to look at your life and choose kind over smart. Now you can be intelligent, you can absolutely learn your trade and learn and know as much as you can. Learn about everything that you possibly can. But once you start to think that you're smarter than God, we stop being kind. We start serving ourselves. So that's your homework. Be kind. Choose kindness. Choose fairness. Choose justice. Choose mercy. And in doing so, you just may make God smile. Let's bow our heads. Yes, He did. Gracious Lord, thank you for showing us the way, for having patience when we choose the wrong path. Lord, thank you for showing us what mercy feels like, for showing us mercy all the days of our lives. And when we fail to learn the lesson, showing us again and again and again. Your grace, Lord, your peace, your hope reaches out to us and teaches us that we are to be that grace and mercy and hope to each other. In your Son's name we pray.